Welcome back, Excellent Leadership Podcast listeners. I am joined today with Mark Mayleben, my colleague, and we are interviewing a good friend, Vice Chairman Ian Ayre of Nashville Soccer Club. Ian is one of the most seasoned and respected leaders in global sport. Ian's journey is remarkable. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Liverpool, served in the British Royal Navy, worked in satellite distribution, and eventually became CEO of Liverpool Football Club. His story is one of grit, perspective, and earned success. Ian helped lead Liverpool through one of the most pivotal transitions in its history, working alongside Fenway Sports Group to usher in a new era that ultimately brought Jurgen Klopp to Anfield, and together they re-established the club among Europe's elite. In today's episode, Ian shares how his early life shaped his leadership lens, what the military taught him about teamwork and resilience, and how he built trust with one of the most passionate fan bases in sport. He also opens up about what it was like to build Nashville Soccer Club from scratch with his owner, John Ingram, with no colors, no coach, no name, what it took to lead both structure and humanity. Whether you're in sports, you're an entrepreneur, fascinated by leadership, this one is for you. Let's get started. Ian Ayre, welcome to the show. If you're watching today's episode on video, you'll notice something different than normal. Miles and Dan had already hit record on the cameras while they were still setting the lighting up and finalizing some of the camera angles, and we decided to keep it because we were having a great conversation with Ian. The first few minutes will be a behind-the-scenes, unofficial interview before we dive into the proper conversation. It's kind of fun. Enjoy.
We had an investor meeting this morning at John's office, and John was asking, he said, Paul's going to be at this thing. I said, don't think so. I said, he'll be around at the conference, though. He said, I'd really like to see him if I'm around.
Oh, good. Is John going to come by and see him?
I think he's going to come by tomorrow.
Very fun.
Yeah.
Because every time he's over there, they get beers, don't they? Or as often as they can.
Yeah, he loves him. Like, he's just...
He takes them to those...
John likes real people, you know what I mean? He loves that. But he was telling a story to these investors about how you guys found me and how that all came together and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of interesting.
We got to get into that.
It was a fun search because I remember I was still really new at Nolan Partners at that time, but I had gone to eat with you a couple of times, so we at least knew each other.
That's right. We met in London at some hotel. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And you had to go to the Chelsea area to be out of the main part of town. Otherwise, you can't walk around London at that point.
So weird, like, and it's so different here, right?
Yeah.
People don't do like celebrity here. It's not a thing, right? It's like they leave them alone. And
yeah.
Whereas in the UK, I mean, it's really funny. Like 7 years I've been here. If I had to pick the 10 times I've been stopped by people to talk to me about the team here, 8 of them will have been about Liverpool.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
Like nobody ever stops you to say, hey, what's going on with Nashville? It's always like, so what do you think? Is Klopp staying? Is he leaving? What's happening with Trent? I'm like, dude, I left like 7 years ago.
You guys know I
don't
left,
know.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a different market as a whole. The resilience you have to have in European football to be a CEO.
Especially
you don't
in
have
Liverpool.
privacy.
Well, especially in Liverpool, in that city, when you're from there. Like, it's almost like it's your fault. Like, not you're one of us, so you should know better.
Yeah.
Right? It's such a strange mantle. I think I'm the only Liverpudlian ever to be the CEO there. I can't think of...
Wow.
Like, Peter Robinson wasn't from there. Rick Parry wasn't from there. Like, I think I'm the only one who was a local who was the CEO.
It's your backyard, your childhood team.
Went to my first game in 1960.
We need to save this for the...
We're recording already.
No, we're not.
It's always, the cameras are always rolling.
Oh, okay. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
I think first game, 1968. I mean, that's a long time ago.
1968, how old were you?
5. My dad took me in the Cop. And, like at school then, back in the day, you wore like short trousers, right? And we were stood at the back of the Cop because it was like 20-odd thousand people standing. And there used to be these like railings at the back. And by halftime, he was so tired of holding me up. I was like a little guy, right? he hooked the belt of my trousers over the railing, so I was just hanging on the railing.
Just like the movies.
I don't think that's allowed in modern day
Yeah,
stadia.
it's probably abuse now. But
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
They were a pretty good team, though. So
Oh, absolutely incredible. So do me a favor, because I've gotten to know your story. You didn't start in sport. You started in the military.
yeah,
And then spent time in like satellites.
Yeah.
You learned Mandarin, if I remember correctly.
Cantonese.
Cantonese.
Well, I think I love
Wow.
I'd love to even go back further because even to decide to go into the military is a big decision in life, right? So take us where you want to, but it'd be fun to know, like you just sharing, you grew up in Liverpool.
I was born in an area of Liverpool, Kirkdale, which is, let's say, it's close enough to Everton's ground that if they score a goal, which doesn't happen very often, then you could literally hear the crowds at Goodison Park when they scored a goal.
Wow.
So I lived that close, and growing up there, it was a pretty tough neighborhood, and we used to mind people's car. Like, people would park their car in ours. There was no like parking zones or any of that stuff that you have today. And they would park in our street, and we would run up, little kids, say, "Can I look after your car?" And they would give you like,
$5
a few dollars or something for looking after it. And this was a thing. And I used to get the money from Everton fans parking in our street, and because they never play at home the same week, Liverpool and Everton. And then the following week, use the money to go watch Liverpool.
Really?
So you were
Yeah.
sticking it to them.
So that
early.
was that was my neighborhood.
in a
then
rough neighborhood, right? The car probably had to actually be watched.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I remember hearing a story. I'm going to interrupt you. It might have been from you, or at least you and I were grabbing a cocktail or a drink with Paul, and the story about saying, "Excuse me, sir, can I look after your car?" And as the fable goes, the person going, I think the dog will do just fine with the big dog in the back of the car. And then say, "Well, really, does the dog put out fires?"
That's right. That's the story. Yeah.
That's the story.
It's an old Liverpool fable. But so I grew up in that neighborhood, and we moved around different parts of Liverpool. And it's a very tough, went to a very tough school, and it was the late 60s, early 70s for me. And if you look back in history, the economy and the struggles and the strikes and the dock strikes, and there wasn't a lot on offer in Liverpool at those times. And I was a pretty decent footballer. Thought I might have a chance. My grandfather and my father had both been in the Navy. And, my dad used to tell all these yarns about traveling to different parts of the world. And it just felt so far away from what I knew. And I'd never really been anywhere. I'd never been abroad, never traveled abroad. We didn't have money for...
Even within continental Europe?
No, we didn't have money for that stuff when I was growing up. We were a pretty poor family. And this sort of lure of, the world, the rest of the world, and all these stories. And so I would been like 15. I went to the recruitment office without telling my parents. And they were like, you have to sit this like exam, and I sit the exam, and then you go back and they say, you pass, you can choose these different kind of trades within it. I tried communications, and then said, okay, you need to take this form because you're 15. Like, you can finish high school at 6. You do finish high school at 16 in the UK. That's when you graduate.
Normally, right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And then you go 2 years college and then university if that's what you choose. And so I was approaching finishing high school. They said, you need to get this signed by your parents. And I thought my mom would never sign it. So I just signed it myself.
Oh, get out of here.
And then took it, got the thing, and then went home, I think, and told my dad. And he's like, okay, let me tell you, Mom. He's like, and she was
Because he was
fine.
probably proud that you did
Yeah,
it.
she was fine. And that was, and then it was the greatest thing I ever did, because I went from this really tough sort of upbringing in a really tough neighborhood, and all of a sudden, I didn't have like, I would tell this story. I think I had used to have 3 sets of clothes when I was a kid. There was my school uniform, the clothes I wore for church on Sunday, and my sports kit, for playing out and playing soccer with my buddies. And all of a sudden, and they were mostly handed down from cousins and stuff. And it was tough. And, my parents worked really hard and did everything they could for us. But what I really loved was I joined the Navy, and in the first day, they measure you up and they give you a whole kit bag full of brand new clothes, uniform, right? And everyone's got the same. And I was like, this is awesome. I remember going to like a call box and phoning my mom and saying, I've got like 5 new shirts. And like that was like the greatest thing ever for me. And when I think now, because I told somebody once, you don't know you're poor until you meet people who aren't poor. Where I lived, everyone was poor, relatively, not like on the poverty line, so to speak, but we didn't have a lot. But when you go and then you meet all these people and they're like, oh, I was in Spain or I was in I had no idea.
Wow.
So it was the greatest thing I ever did. And I found this kind of meteoric rise. It was kind of like, they would give you a task because that's the structure, right? We'll give you a task. You just do the task. And so they would run in that direction for 200 meters. I'd like, how fast can I get there? And I had this like incredible sort of rise in promotion and stuff and served all over the world. And
mostly communications roles or?
Yeah, always like, got promoted up to, petty officer. And as I went through, it was kind of like each time you got advanced into the next role, then you started on the work you need to do to get to the next one. And I remember getting to about, I think I was 28. It's been in 9 years, I think. They basically said to you, okay, for the next promotion now, you need to have 5 years of seniority in the current role. And I said, what does that mean? And they were like, well, you can't get promoted for 5 years. Okay, that doesn't work for me. Yeah. I'm out.
Right.
And I literally said, I'm like, and you basically you like resign, you give like notice. You have to give 18 months notice. I gave the notice that day. So I'm out and I left.
What does communications do in the military?
So you're really managing all of the sort of signal traffic, so you're either in the operations room or you're on the bridge of the ship and you're relaying what's going on. So in a kind of conflict situation, you're calling all the stuff that's coming in. If there's a missile or whatever, or as an attack or as an air raid, you're calling all that. So you're communicating with all the other ships, right, in the region. And then in in more peaceful times, of which mostly, hopefully, you're really kind of you're just interacting with other ships and bases all over the world. And I served on a number of ships, and also served in a bunch of communication centres in Whitehall in London and Northwood and Hong Kong. So all over the world.
What was your favorite city that you went to?
Hong Kong was, I spent, with the Navy, I spent almost 5 years there.
Just stationed out of Hong Kong.
Yeah, wow. Incredible. Yeah.
That's great.
And that's where you picked up Cantonese.
Yeah. Not actually while I was in the Navy. I went back there after I left the Navy. I went into the satellite communications, consumer electronics industry for Pace, a UK company who make all the set-tops for satellite for Sky in Europe and Australia and all over the world. And I was ended up being CEO of that business in Asia, of their Asia operation. And because all of my distributors were, across Asia, I picked up Cantonese.
So you told me a story one time that I found very entertaining, where you were still young in your career and you were invited into a meeting, kind of like a pitch meeting, where the Chinese that you were negotiating with were speaking in Cantonese, but your boss didn't know that you knew Cantonese, and you never shared you knew Cantonese because it was never asked. It would have kind of been out of line. Tell me that story again.
So the story was that we actually went, I actually wasn't even, so I wasn't even based in Hong Kong at that time. We flew out, the company had an office in Hong Kong, and the guy who was running it, that my boss, the owner of the company said to me, I'd like you to come out on a trip. You used to live in Hong Kong, right? So yeah. So I go out there with him. We meet with the guy who's the current managing director or whatever of the operation out there. And we go to this meeting with this distributor, these two, it was actually like a family distribution business. I never forget, their names were Eddie and Lena Chan, right? So we go meet with them, and they speak good English, and we're having this meeting, and the guy who was the guy running the company in Hong Kong for us is kind of interacting with them. And whenever he finishes speaking in English, they're speaking to each other and they're saying, like, essentially, I really don't like this asshole. This guy doesn't understand what we're saying. And they're just being really disparaging. And I'm just sitting there going, And it's only when we leave and, we kind of go have dinner or something, and then the guy running, I won't say his name because it wouldn't be fair, but he leaves and goes home and leaves me and the big boss at the hotel. And we're just having a nightcap. And he said, what do you think of the meeting? I said, well, they essentially think the guy who runs the operation is an asshole. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, let me tell you exactly what they said. He said, how did you know that? I said, well, I know enough Cantonese to know that they think he's an asshole. So, and we got back, and like, I was like 3 months later, he comes to me. I get called into a board meeting. I'm just like nobody, you know. And there's the whole board of the company are there. And he's like, we have a proposition for you. What is it? We'd like you to go run the business in Hong Kong. And I was like, well, what about the other guy? And they're like, well, we just fired him. Long story short, I take the job, and not only did they fire him, but he was actually the owner's brother-in-law. So it's like, so I never knew, you know what I mean? I didn't play it that way, but yeah, it came in handy.
But you say you picked up, no one just picks up Cantonese, right?
Well, it's interesting. When I was there with the Navy, a big part of the role of the British Navy in Hong Kong, when it was still a colony, was illegal immigrant patrol and smugglers and all that sort of stuff. So we do a lot of border patrol type stuff on boats. So
like Coast Guard type stuff.
Yes, like that. And so we would board and search Chinese fishing boats and vessels. And so you had to learn, you know, basics, right?
Yeah,
and you worked with, what they do is, I actually went out there last year for a 40-year reunion with a bunch of my buddies from the Navy who all served out there. And we met up with, so the Navy employed a bunch of local Cantonese, you know, Hong Kong Chinese people called locally employed LEPs, locally employed personnel. So the ship would be about 50% British Navy and 50% LEPs. And they have an association in Hong Kong. So we went back, about 20 of us went back last November for a week and met up with some of those guys. And I actually met a guy who used to do board and search with me. Oh, he had a photo of the two of us.
Whoa,
yeah, like amazing. From back in the day.
Oh, did you take it home with you?
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
That's so
like it's
cool.
incredible.
That's
and he
great.
said to me, like, that's his wife's in the photo holding the baby. He goes, that's my daughter. I was like, oh, cool. He goes, yeah, she's 40 this year.
Jeez.
Wow.
Right? So
how fast time flies, right?
Crazy.
God. So real quick, so from 15 years old to when do you leave the
I think
Navy?
it was 10 years. So
10 years,
yeah,
okay.
because I was 16 years old when I
16
joined.
and
So
26.
26, I think, yeah.
And then what do you originally do at Pace? And how long does it take
So
to
I
get
joined,
you to...
I left Pace, and it was right around the time that satellite television was kind of a bit kind of stuff people did in their basement. You know, it wasn't like mainstream. It was also around that time that the military, for about 7 or 8 years at that point, had started using satellite for communication, you know, for broadcasting information. So I knew a lot about the technology of satellite.
Yeah.
Not for television, it has to be said, but I just went for an interview, you know, like I was kind of like, I need a job, right? And I went in and I ended up joining the company in the professional sales division. So not the consumer part, but actually looking at stuff that was more like the technology they'd been utilizing in the military. That was for commercial use. And so I had this commercial sales manager role. I'd never sold anything in my life. I managed to blag my way into the job, you know, and it, you know, I did that for a little while, and I did okay, not brilliant. It was such a young company. I mean, we ended up doing an IPO in '96 for about $600 million.
Wow.
Yeah, about, you know, which was like 6 years later,
course,
7 years later. But like at that time, it was, you know, 40, 50 people in the whole company.
When you joined. Wow.
Yeah, and then I went out to Asia, and we had a factory in the UK. We set up a subcontract factory in Thailand. We did some manufacturing in India, and I ran the whole of the Asian region by the end.
Wow. Very cool.
I have no idea how I ended up running it. You know, honestly, it was, I would say 80% of what I achieved was just building great relationships. Like the Asian culture, I love it. It's my favorite part of the world. And it's all built on trust, right? So you have to be genuine. You can't rush things. You have to, if you say you're going to do something, you kind of need to, where you can, follow it through. and you need to build real relationships. And like we went back, as I said, last November after 40 years, and these people were genuinely, we were all pleased to see each other. And I went and met my old PA from 1996 in Hong Kong, who worked for me at Pace. She's still alive and around in Hong Kong, and she was, I can't wait to see you. And like
incredible.
True relationships that last forever. And that's such an important part of Asian culture, is respect and keeping in touch, and family, and
Wow.
Yeah, I look at business and I often will say, like, people buy from you because they like you, they trust you, they find you credible, and they have a need for your product. But what I've certainly seen in the Western world is sometimes even if they don't like you, as long as they have a need for your product and they find the product credible, they might invest into that. Not in the Eastern world, not in Asia. Like, likability and trust rank really high on the decision-making tree.
For sure. And one of the things I found later, that to my own advantage, if you like, was when I went back to Asia for the third time to live in Malaysia, working in Total Sports, we had a sports marketing agency. The reason that appealed to me as a business opportunity was I could see how difficult sports teams in particular, but also in genuinely Western companies, found doing business in Asia for the reasons you just said, that you've got to go with a different approach. You can't expect anything overnight. We had huge success with companies like we managed the television sales rights for WWE for the whole of Asia and their live events. But the ability to go into Thailand and negotiate a deal to play in an arena and not get ripped off, and sell the tickets and sell the merchandise and sell the TV rights, that's a little bit of a fine art. And it's all about building those relationships. And whether you're selling satellite television equipment or, a Liverpool tour or a sponsorship, it's all the same. I just think the products are relevant. You have to know the product, but it's all about the relationship and the way you approach it, particularly in that part of the world.
So the military would have helped shape your leadership and management style. What does the military get right about leadership and management, and where might that not translate into the corporate or the sporting world?
I think all of it translates. It's kind of like, I always think of it as like extreme leadership, right? Because what you learn very quickly is it's all about discipline, and it's all about structure, and it's all about commitment to a plan, right? So, if you're going to go into a conflict situation, you have to have a plan, and you have to create structure, and you have to have discipline and leadership. You have to have a structure that everybody believes in, everybody knows their role, everybody knows what's going on. And they just sound like the things we would say to our team if we were going to go try to sell a sponsorship, right? Who are we going to go talk to, and what are we offering? And it's just the same. But the difference is, if you get stuff wrong in the military, at an extreme level, people die, right? So it's drilled into you so hard. And sometimes when you first start at like what people here in America call boot camp, you think like it's such bullshit. Because, like you're getting shouted at and screamed at and disciplined for like not folding your kit to a certain size and laying it out and making your boots shiny. But it's all discipline, and you don't realize it at the time. But everything you do from day one is all about structure and discipline and a plan. So it's like, you've got to get from here to there. And it's, I use things from that time every day. Whenever I catch myself doing it particularly, I think like, I remember when I learned that. It's something I've kept with me the whole time. And you have to, you live, for instance, on a warship. Some of the ships I served on were tiny, but on an average size warship, you've probably got 25 guys in a space that's 20 feet by 20 feet, living, like sleeping, clothes, not eating in the mess hall.
3-4 high bunk beds.
Yeah. And so what does that teach you that you can take? It teaches you that you have to learn how to actually live and conduct yourself within a group of people. You don't have to like everybody, but you have to live with everybody, and you have to understand what different personalities are and not be overly reactive to them.
Right.
which is such a great skill to have, or a great learning to have when you get into business and you're managing, at Nashville Soccer Club with 200, 300 people. They're all different, right? I don't have to love them all. I don't have to like them all, but I have to work with them all. And the same at other organizations. And they're all things that you're learning as you go along and you just don't realize. And then as you go into the rest of the world, you actually find it harder. I found that because everyone in that environment in the military has the same disciplines and the same learning and the same structure. Well, then you go into the real world and you got people who went to college and drank too much or whatever.
Right.
And, you've got everything in between, right? People who never had any formal training or respect or discipline or these things. And you're trying to mold them together. But I think it might be the best foundation anyone, certainly in my time, that I could have possibly had.
That's fascinating. Makes a lot of sense. So fast forward, truncate us the rest of your career history, so we can get up to speed on what you've been up to at Nashville. So you finish at Pace.
I finish at Pace after the IPO. I come back. I'm still there, and the former owner of Pace, the guy who gave me the job initially, had left after the IPO, about a year after the IPO. Obviously, I'd done a great job for him, at least. And he called me and he said, "Hey, you love football, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm still living in Hong Kong, right? And he's like, "Thinking of buying a team." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "You want to do it with me?" I'm like, "I don't know if you checked, but I didn't make 600 million like you." And he goes, "No, you don't need to put your money in." He said, "But I'll buy the team. You help me find it and run it." Wow. And that's how I got. So when you get these kids from college come and say, "Can you tell me how do I get to be the same?" It's easy. Just run an electronics company,
Right. Yeah.
and then get the guy to call you. And that's literally what happened. And we bought. We spent about 18 months doing a search, doing like due diligence across the whole of the sort of UK football landscape. So Championship, EFL, Premier League. And we happened in the end upon Huddersfield Town, which is a sort of provincial city in the middle of England. We bought the team. We finished building the stadium. We brought in new coaches, and that was my foray into football. And it was like,
you're how old?
1999. So what would that have been? 37.
Wow,
something like
how
that.
cool is that?
Something like that. Yeah, I was chairman and CEO at 37.
Was it as fun in practice as it was on paper?
It was nuts, because it was like, they're quite small business. I'd gone from running this gigantic PLC electronics company to a £10 million turnover football team in the north of England. But it was so interesting because of the bizarre nature of business in sports. I mean, it's got better in some areas, but in others it hasn't. Buying and selling players is like horse trading. I mean, there isn't really a market. It's not like somebody says the price for this player is X. The agent or the selling club just makes it up, right? And I'd like to think there's a little bit more science to it in these days with analytics and what have you. But back then, it was kind of like finger in the air. What do you think? And the way these agents were and how you had to deal with them, and the way some of the other club owners who were selling and the players, and dealing with players and dealing with this. Like, I was so used to structure. The only thing that I found when I arrived that I could relate to was the group around the playing side. The players and the coach was like being in a military unit, right? They show up, they all wear the same clothes. They all eat in the same place. They all work for the one guy. It's kind of very similar. So I've always been able to connect with that. But the actual structure of the business, and actually the quality of people and process and all these things that you find then in sports teams was terrible. I mean, terrible. I mean,
especially back then, right?
Yeah. I mean, comparative to general industry, I would say sports has taken a long time to catch up with real structure and real, quality of systems and processes and, all of that type of thing. But that was so went into there, did that for 3 years, and it was pretty, once I got used to it, I knew it was pretty easy to do. And then myself and the owner got elected onto a committee. This was around the start of the dot-com era, 2000, 2001. We got elected onto the Football League committee to look at digital rights and what the teams, the 72 teams of the Football League, were going to do with these new digital rights that nobody had any clue what they were or what they were worth. The proposal was to put together a business that basically consolidated all of those rights into a single platform. We were really driving that, and they brought in some investment from NTL, a big sort of telco. Long story short, I was asked to go be the founding managing director of that business and I had to leave the club because I would have had a conflict of interest. Yeah. So I ended up leaving there and going being the founding MD of that business. And at the time...
So you went from a $10 million business to a $0 business.
Well, it was 250 million. Yeah, it was a startup with $250 million or pounds of investment.
Oh, that much?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right off the bat.
But it had the rights, the digital rights of every team, 72 teams in the Football League in perpetuity.
Jeez.
So I went and set that whole thing up with a whole bunch of people. It's actually, I left a few years later. The business was then merged with Perform, another media business, and then was subsequently absorbed into DAZN. Mm-hmm. So the DAZN business now is, part of that was what came through there. So I did that, and then, that kind of ran its course. I got to a point where I thought, there's not much I can do here to keep this going forward. Went back to Asia, which is when we, went to the sports marketing business, Total Sports Asia, and did that for 5 years in Malaysia, based in Malaysia, but living and working across Asia, WWE, World Badminton, FIFA, lots of television
Cricket's
rights.
Big in that part of the world.
Yeah, US Tennis Association rights. Like the agency owned the US Open tennis rights for Asia and redistributed WWE. So a lot of television rights experience, which was awesome. And then I kind of ran into a brick wall with the other shareholders in 2006, where I felt we were on the cusp of, we can go raise, millions and millions of dollars against what we're doing and open 25 offices. Majority shareholder, he just saw it as like a family business that he just wanted to keep going, sort of quietly. And so my view was, okay, this isn't for me. So I left. And literally as I was leaving, I got this random phone call from somebody like this guy. It wasn't him, or Paul, who said, hey, Liverpool are looking for a new, they'd just been bought by Hicks and Gillette and looking for a CEO. I ended up being in New York for an investor meeting on something else and then running into, I thought, like the stars aligned.
That's unbelievable.
And long story short, like 3 months later or something, I went to Liverpool, not as the CEO. Rick Parry was still the CEO. They brought me in, said, look, we don't know what we're going to do just yet. I came in, I was on the board. I ran all of the commercial operation for a couple of years, and then they had this huge fallout, very public spat, which ended up with myself and Martin Broughton, who was the chairman, Sir Martin, Christian Perslow. The three of us as board directors were appointed by the banks to sell the club from the owners.
Wow.
And so we all got sued for $1 billion each.
$1 billion each?
Yeah. And then went through a big high-profile court case in the High Court in London.
What went through your head at that moment in time, though? Was it panic? Was it, hey, this is absurd, there's no way it happens?
It was tough.
Like, that's scary.
We were staying in a hotel in London because there was all this wrangling going on. And we were served the papers at the hotel. There was a knock at the door at like 4 a.m. And and I looked out the sort of spy hole in the door and I could see like some concierge type guy. So I opened the door and he was with a guy, and the guy's like, got to serve you these papers. I'm like, what are you talking about? Have you got the right room, I opened it up and it was, I'll never forget, I've still got it. There's a big piece of paper and it was from the High Court of Texas, and it says, greetings, you have been sued. Greetings. And then one, and then all these zeros, like, however many zeros a billion is. It was like, wow. And so I called the other two who were also staying at the hotel and said, have you have you had the knock? And they're like, yeah. Literally, we met in the lobby like 20 minutes later, like all like hair everywhere. And
Creditors were American banks?
the creditors were all over the place. It was
okay.
It was RBA. It wasn't them that was suing us. It was the owners.
Oh, it was
for
the
selling
owners.
the club.
Oh, geez.
From under them. So yeah, we'd sold the club to FSG, who now are still the owners. And so yeah, we just went through a process which lasted almost 2 years. One thing about being from Liverpool is everything. You always see you always try to find the fun side of everything. It's kind of like, what's the point, right? And perspective is a lot, again, that I learned in the military. You see a lot of very difficult stuff and, quite traumatic stuff. And I think one of the great things you learn in traumatic events, and it doesn't have to be the military, it can be, death or something that happens to you, is on those days, I think you think it can never get any worse than this. And if you have that perspective, you can use it when stuff happens that isn't really that bad.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there and again, being the sort of flippant scouser that I am, saying, well, listen, if they can find $1 billion in my account, I'll settle at 80%, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll keep the 20%. They're welcome to it, but that never happened.
Not yet, though.
But I think perspective is such an important thing. And my perspective was I haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
I was mandated by the bank to do this, who had the right to do it. My fiduciary duties as director of the club were to do the right thing for the club before, anyone else. And that doesn't take away that it was painful and stressful and a lot of dark days. And I remember doing a 11-hour deposition in a law office in London.
Wow.
Cameras, the whole thing for a fund, somebody in New York who'd loaned them a bunch of money. And it was tough. But
that's amazing. Like what you just said, my fiduciary responsibility was to the club, not to the owners who had hired you and given you the opportunity that you had. I don't often think of it like that. Is that how it is?
It's the company, right? It's the company that you work for. The company.
Yeah.
You don't work for a person. You work for the entity that is established. And as a director of a company, you have a fiduciary duty to always do the right thing in the interests of the company.
That's so interesting.
And so the company was Liverpool Football Club.
Yeah.
And the bank, in its loan documents that fronted a lot, because there was a lead bank and the others were sort of secondary, had been able to take some of the voting shares from, because they defaulted.
I see. Yeah.
So I already had a vote because I was on the board, and the chairman had a vote. And so our votes and Christian's vote alongside the votes that gave us the majority.
I gotcha. Yeah,
that makes sense. And so it was when we brought Fenway to the table and that deal, the bank and everybody was agreed to do it, that the owners, I don't blame them for trying to rescue their own investment for whatever reason, but it was pretty traumatic.
Oh, I can't imagine the stress you must have been going through during it. Well, shout out to good recruiters. Sounds like this guy was a pre-Chad, right? Recruiters who find you halfway around the world to give you this opportunity of a lifetime. Because you grew up in Liverpool, take us back to that phone call of you're getting the job. This is happening. Was that just sheer ecstasy? You can't imagine this is happening to you?
The two things I remember about it, both of which are really funny, was obviously huge ecstasy at the idea. And then the two things that happened was they asked me to send a photo for a press release, right? Because, they said, we can hire a photographer or you can just get somebody to take a photo. It's I get a friend to come around and it's Malaysia, right? It's 35 degrees Celsius every day, 100 and some degrees. So I've got a jacket and a tie and a shirt because how formal sports are in the UK. So I've got the thing, but I'm wearing a pair of shorts. It's just a head and shoulders shot. So I always remember whenever I saw that photo and still see it now and
keep
again.
Thinking about the shorts.
I always think to myself, if only they knew I had shorts and sandals on.
You made it popular before Zoom and Skype came out.
Exactly. And then the second thing was that I called my dad, who's been a Liverpool fan forever, right?
Oh, I can't imagine that.
And I called him and I said, hey, I have news. He said, all right, what's going on? I said, I'm coming back home. I'm coming to live home. He's going, why? What's happened? I said, well, going to be running Liverpool. And he's like, what, the city? It's like, no, I'm not going to be the mayor. I'm going to be like Liverpool Football Club. And I think he said something like, why would they let you do that? But it was such a proud moment that I arrived, and the first day I was there, the club secretary gave me all these different things. They gave me like a lanyard with a pass that opened all the doors and a key and a parking space. And, and the parking space at the old main stand, it's not there anymore. We rebuilt it while I was there. But back in those days, from when I was a kid, it was still the same. And the parking spaces are numbered. And back in the day when I was like 12, 13, the players, you didn't have squad numbers back then. The players would show up, and if you were Kenny Dalglish, you always played in the number 7 shirt, but you weren't squad number 7. You just got, you could, if somebody else came on or he was injured, somebody else would play number 7. That's how it worked, right? So the players who were like regulars used to park in the spots that the number correlated to, and I got space number 7, and he was like my hero. I was like, oh my God, they've given me, I think they've made a mistake. I went back to the guy. I was like, I think you've made a mistake. He's like, what? I was like, does Kenny Dalglish still come to the games? I mean, he's like an old man now, and he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I think you've given me his spot. And he goes, no. They don't park here anymore. The players park over the other side. That was, the first game was the next day. We played Chelsea. And I think it was the first game of the season at Anfield, and we won. And I went home that night, and literally I'd moved back to Liverpool. I didn't have a bank account, didn't have a house. So the club rented a place for me short term. And I'm in this apartment, and my brothers both were in Liverpool. I wake up Sunday morning with nothing to do, right? And I rang my brother. I was like, hey. And he's like, what? It's like, I got the keys to Anfield. You want to go like shoot some goals?
No way.
And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I have the keys. Like, they gave me like a pass. So we go to this like sports retailer on the way and buy a ball. And we get there, park in this car. There's nobody at the stadium that we can see. And I swipe this card, and the green light comes on, the door opens.
What a special
And we
feeling.
go in, and the three of us, me and my two, we're kicking this ball around on the field.
Oh my God.
And all of a sudden this security guy comes around. He just starts screaming at us to get off the field. Yeah. And we come over, and I'm like, that's okay. I'm one of the new directors. He's, yeah, of course you are. Get out. And he throws us out, and I'm just laughing, And then the next day, Monday, I turn up for my first day of work, and he's on the gate, and he's like, what can I do for you? And I was like, I'm Ayre, I'm new director. And he's like, you the guy who was on the pitch? I was like, yeah. He goes, sorry. I guess it's all good.
It's great. I'm glad to know,
man.
You protect the pitch.
Did you guys sit down in that moment? It's just like, I can't believe this is actually happening.
I did it a lot. There was some in those days as well. There wasn't many staff. The staff were all based at the stadium, and sometimes be in our offices, and I'd just take a moment, and I'd go and I'd walk down the tunnel and just sit in the manager's seat or something and think, how the hell did I get here? Right. And even I don't know, like 7-8 years in. And actually the final week I was at Liverpool, I did it.
Oh,
I waited till like late in the evening, went to the security guy who liked me by then. He got to know me after 10 years. John, his name was. And I said to him, hey, I'm just going to go. It's my, everyone knew it was my last week. I said, just going to go have a moment. I just walked around the pitch and sat in the seat. And it was so special,
Oh, yeah.
Quick interruption. If you are enjoying the Excellent Leadership Podcast, I have a small favor to ask you. Could you please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review? It helps us grow the Excellent Leadership Podcast community and ensures we keep bringing you top-tier guests, powerful insights, and impactful episodes. Thanks for your support. Now, back to the show. Ian, you maintained a role, you even were promoted underneath a new ownership group. Often in acquisitions, the management team gets pushed out. What did you do differently if you look back in time to have won the confidence of a new ownership group to A, not get pushed out, but B, get promoted into more responsibility? Because that is rare.
The first thing I did when they bought it was said, if you want me to go, I'll go. Because I agree with you. I think sometimes a new organization come, they want their own people. I respect that. And I'd rather be respectful of that than kind of force your way because you got a contract or something. And they were like, no. Like we did this partly because we met you, and I was generating all the revenue at that time. I was driving all of the commercial business. I did the kind of what at the time was, I think, the world's largest shirt sponsorship deal.
Wow.
Kit deal, these sort of things. They were like, no, we don't want you to go anywhere. And then I think over the time that the club was pretty distressed after the ownership wrangle. I mean, really distressed, financially significantly distressed, and fan base had been at war with the ownership as well. And so there was a lot of spinning plates at the time. You've been there, it's a very unique organization. Every football fan or sports fan in the world thinks their club is the best and the loudest and the best fans and the most unique. The one thing I'd say about Liverpool is a very insular city. It's very inward looking. It looks after its own. It cares about its own. Nobody's bigger than the club. Those types of references, and it's important to understand the real local nuances. It's a global organization, and you have to recognize that. But you also have to understand how much respect and expectation of respect there is from the fans of the way you do things, the way you conduct yourselves. And I think Fenway were really smart, and I think they'd seen that at the Red Sox. If you go to Fenway Park, it still looks like an old school baseball stadium. And yeah, it's very modern inside, but it's still got that look and feel, and they still, they keep the tradition.
Yeah, they preserve.
But at the same time, move it forward, which is a real skill. I know that a big part of me being given the opportunity to be the CEO and then kind of lead that change for the next 7 years was I knew everything there was to know about that city, that club, that organization. I'd been going there since I was, this high. I had huge respect. I knew how people thought about Liverpool Football Club in Australia as much as they've thought about it in Liverpool. And I think all of those assets, and it'd be small things like I remember John Henry saying to me once, is it true that Liverpool have won the championship 18 times? I'm like, yeah. He goes, why don't we put pennants on the stand roof like they have at Fenway for every time they've won it? I said, that would have been great if we'd done that when we won them. I said, but given that Manchester United has 20, like if we go put 18 up now, they'll just laugh at us.
Yeah.
And it's little thing, and that seems like a small thing, but it's getting those things right that endear everybody. Okay, they care about the club, and everyone makes mistakes as you go along, but the more inside knowledge you have, I think, is crucial to success in an organization like that one, in a city like that one.
As I think of your final years there, you're part of signing Klopp. You're part of Formino as well, right? Discovering him, he wasn't playing as big of a club. Like, give us some stories.
So Bobby Firmino, I flew to, this was maybe the most travel I ever did in 1 week in my life. I went to his agent. So he was playing for Hoffenheim in the Bundesliga. And so I fly to Hoffenheim to meet, I think I'm flying there to meet the player and his agent. I fly there, the agent's there, no sign of the player. And they're like, oh yeah, he's at the Copa America in Chile. I'm like, geez. Okay. So we have a big meeting with the agent. And so I meet with the agent, we kind of scratch out what a player deal might look like. And they said, we need to go see Hoffenheim. So then we go see the owner of Hoffenheim, who's the owner of SAP, the software company. So we go meet him. He lives in Hoffenheim. And make a deal for the player with Hoffenheim. And then I said, look, I really don't feel good about doing this unless I've spoken to the player and I know because it all comes down to the player in the end. If they don't want to go,
they can veto.
They can veto, right? So I'm like, where is he exactly? He says, he's in Santiago, Chile. I'm like, how do we get there? I mean, literally, it's like
really,
yeah. So we fly, myself and the agent, one of the agent's people. We fly. I think we flew to like Sao Paulo from Munich or Frankfurt or somewhere, and then connect from Sao Paulo into Chile. And Brazil are in camp in the Copa America. They don't let anyone in. If you ever go to an international teams camp during a tournament, it's like lockdown. They don't let anyone in. But the former goalkeeper at Liverpool, second goalkeeper, was a Brazilian and was on the coaching staff. And I called him and I said, hey, listen, I'm here. He said, what are you doing here? I said, confidentially, trying to finish off a deal for Bobby Firmino. I said, any chance we can get in the team hotel? He goes, Dunga was the manager, former player Dunga. He said, let's speak to the boss. And he speaks to Dunga and he says, it's Liverpool, okay, come in. We'll go in.
Goes back down to relationships.
Go in, meet Bobby with the agent. We talk to him, talking through. He's like, I'm in. And I've still, the photo, if you Google Bobby Firmino signs for Liverpool, it's me and him stood in the lobby of a hotel. I brought a Liverpool shirt with me that I bought in the airport in Frankfurt
so cool.
or somewhere. Yeah.
So how do you know a player like that his success at a smaller club, Hoffenheim's still a big club, but a smaller club than Liverpool, is going to translate to the Premier League and into Champions League? I mean, it's a big bet to sign a player like that.
I think the truth is you never know, right? But I think in today's world, and even then, and one of the things that I have huge admiration for everyone from FSG and people like, Ian Graham, Michael Edwards, the people I worked with, we built at the time, something that was very proprietary in terms of an analytical, analysis of players at all sorts of levels. So buying data from all sorts of different leagues, analyzing player performance, and going way beyond where I think most people then went. A lot more people do it now, and we do some of it here. But even to the point of, we would analyze people's social media for a player, because that tells you a lot about an individual. If you can get into somebody's social media sort of ether and understand the sort of things they post and the sort of person they are and the sort of the people they hang around with, it gives you a real insight into what sort of individual are and how they might transition into that group, right? As was the case with many players. Bobby was in that. And again, it was really interesting that when we made the announcement, when Bobby left recently, a year or two ago, to go to Saudi Arabia, it was like heartbreak for Liverpool fans. And he will always be lauded as one of the greatest players ever to be at Liverpool and so loved by the fans. When we signed him, it was kind of like, it wasn't like, oh my God, Liverpool got Firmino. It was kind of like the media thought we paid too much. And people were like, don't. But, we saw something. The same with Felipe Coutinho, who I think we signed for 12 million euros from Inter Milan. Same process, flew to Milan, sat, sort of gate posted the CEO of Inter Milan in his office. I sat there for 5 hours till he would see me. And wow. But the same information, and some work and some don't. It's wrong to say that, you do all that work and it always works out. Of course it doesn't. But it's a more educated, it's risk management, really.
Yeah. Right? How is that different for a manager? Because appointing Jurgen was a major moment for the club and has turned into tremendous success for the club. How do you know a manager's got it and that they're going to work well?
Well, and especially I think they had been through 3 already after FSG bought the club, right? They'd gone through.
FSG came in
short stints.
FSG came in, and again, part of that, why did they pick me? One of the first recommendations I made to John, Henry, and Mike and Tom was, we need to bring Kenny back. He's the only, the whole thing is in chaos, right? The fans had been at war with the club. The sponsors weren't happy. The media we were a joke in the media. Court case was rumbling. The only person on the planet, in my opinion, that everybody loved in that organization was Kenny Dalglish. He's Liverpool's greatest ever player, one of their greatest ever managers, coaches. And he's on a cruise in the Middle East with Marina, his wife. And I call him, I get through to the ship. How do you call somebody on a ship? Call him on the ship. I'm like, where are you? And he's like, I don't know if this is something you're interested in, but we'd really like you to come and be the manager. And he's like, he's deadpan, and he's like, okay, when do I start? I was like, well, we play Man United day after tomorrow on the Sunday at Old Trafford. And he's like, let me check on the flights. And the cruise ship docked in Bahrain, I think it was. And we had a flight booked for him from Bahrain into Manchester. He landed on the Sunday morning. Somebody met him with some Liverpool gear and the jacket, and he literally walked out on the pitch as the manager.
No way.
Yeah.
Just like
so
that.
we had Kenny, got us to 2 finals that year. And then I think I love Kenny. Like, he's a dear friend. Like, he's my greatest ever idol. I never, even in my own mind, I never thought he was the long-term solution, but he was the right person at the right time. And he could have done more for sure. And everybody was super grateful. Then we found Brendan Rodgers, who again, I think, it's fair to say advances. We came second under Brendan. And we're building, if you look back at the period from when Kenny arrived to when Jurgen arrived, so many of the pieces that end up being the team that go on and win the championship were coming together in those periods. From Bobby Firmino was before Jurgen. He was during Brendan's time, and others that come little by little. You can't build a roster in 1, 2, 3 years. You got to build it over time.
Yeah.
Sadio Mane, we did Divock Origi, we did James Milner, we did. The list goes on.
Gerrard as his first coaching gig too, didn't you?
So Stephen was coming to the end of his career when Brendan was the manager, and we offered him a deal, which he didn't like, and to stay for a little longer. It's always hard when a legend is near the end because they still think they're the same player.
Of course.
And everyone else doesn't.
Yeah.
And no disrespect to him, he was incredible. So he decided to come here to LA Galaxy. But then I don't think that was really the right thing for him. And then his agent, Struan, called me and said, look, Stephen might be interested in coming back, coaching. I was like, well, he's not a coach yet. He'd have to start at the bottom. And that coaches in our academy gets 60 grand a year.
Wow.
And he said, okay, let's do it.
That's cool.
So respect to him.
I love that.
Respect to him. He came, he did that. He did some ambassadorial work for us, and then ended up getting the Rangers. He ran the U21s, I think, for Liverpool, and then ended up going to Rangers as the coach and did really, really well there. And so good for him.
That's great. But back to Chad's original question of tell us the Jurgen story.
Yeah, same. I mean, actually finding a coach is similar to a player. I mean, there's, it's a lot about statistics, right? It's about results but also about how are they around players, and how do they run their coaching sessions, and how organized are they, and how do they fit? We talked a lot about after FSG come in about, as a club, whether you're Nashville Soccer Club or you're Liverpool Football Club, I think the club owns the style of play. It's not the manager. I always find it odd when a club recruits a manager that doesn't play their style.
That's interesting.
I mean, Manchester United have just done it, right? With Ayre. Like, he plays a very distinct style of football, which is nothing like they've been playing. And I think that's a big risk because you have to change so many personnel. Jurgen brought a different energy and a different style to some level, but not a million miles from what we had with Brendan. We'd done all of that work. We'd done all of that background into how he was as a person. Players who played for him love him. And it's like recruiting, right?
Yeah.
You're referencing people all the time. You're speaking to players who played for him.
Yeah.
You're speaking to assistants who work with him. You're speaking to other managers and coaches who came across him. And what we found was he was just a genuinely good person, and obviously had been successful in various forms. And so then we set up to meet him. And the media being the media, particularly around European soccer, we're like, this is going to get out, and we really don't want it because we still had some work to do. And so he was on vacation here in America.
Oh, no way.
He was at the Grand Canyon, and I called his agent, Mark, and said, hey, we'd like to set up to meet Jurgen. He said, well, he's in the Grand Canyon. I said, well, we're not meeting him there, right? He said, let me speak to him. And Jurgen tells the story of that he gets the call from the agent, and it's Liverpool, right? And he always tells this story. There's only 2 teams he would have taken the call from. I think I know who the other one is, but I'm not going to let him say that. But he tells his boys, his 2 sons and Ulla, his wife, and tells them, they're like, yeah, you have to go for the meeting. So he breaks his vacation.
Yeah.
And we meet in New York, and we had a contact who had a law office in New York where you could drive underground.
No way.
and come up in this elevator into some boardroom.
Even you were afraid of New York media.
Well,
catching
yeah,
winds.
I mean, we thought New York was much safer because
Yeah, of
obviously
course.
it's like
Yeah.
nobody really knows who you are there. And we met him there. That was the first time I ever met him. I'd spoken to him on the phone because, again, we were so worried about things getting out. I booked everyone's flight, like my flight, his flight from wherever to New York, his hotel room, my hotel room. I booked it all on my own credit card. I physically did it and said, nobody will know. Like, not even my
internal
assistant.
staff.
Like,
Wow.
I was like, nobody. When we first met him, he said to me, he said, it's great to meet you. He said, it's great to see somebody who's English, who's so organized. I says, well, we're not as organized as the Germans. He says, yeah, and you're not as good at penalties either. And that was and I thought, I like this guy.
Yeah, we can work well together.
And it was honestly, he's one of those people. I mean, what you see is what you get. He doesn't dress anything up. He doesn't do anything for effect. He's one of those unique people, and I've met a few of them in my life, that you walk in a room and you'll almost always come out feeling better than when you went into the room. Doesn't take himself too seriously. He's very funny. He loves a joke. I had it out with him a couple of times, and he's like 6'5" or something, and I'm 5'10", and he's a big, but he's very respectful. We disagreed on things, and it's done. Like, he's such a great person. Of all the people I've met in the sport, he's one of the people I have the most admiration for and still keep in touch with.
That's really cool.
So after that, you had a cup of coffee in Germany and then decided to come over to MLS. What got you excited about starting Nashville Soccer Club and being employee number one at that point? And then we're going to transition to the same questions we ask everybody, because you've got to run. We're running out of time. We could go forever.
As you know, I get the call from Nolan Partners, would I be interested? And, my initial reactions, I think, were, why would I want to go to MLS? Why would I go to America? Where is Nashville exactly? And then encouraged by you guys and by John himself to some degree, come visit, come see. And there ended up being three things that made me make the decision. The first one was, if you're going to do what I do in sports, who gets to build the whole thing, right? It's so unique. I mean, you're not going to get to build a football team in Europe from scratch ever, right, unless it's an amateur one for your kids, right? So to get to do that was, you maybe end up being one of 20 people in this, century that has got to do that, to take all your learnings. The second thing is, I believe, and I learned, sometimes the hard way, that you have to have great owners. And I say this without, any doubt. I think John Ingram might be the best owner in world sports to work with, because he's smart, committed. Like, he doesn't, he empowers you. If he asks you to go do the job, sure, he wants you to check in with him and tell him what you're doing and tell him if you have issues. But he's like, gives you 100% backing and 100% faith in your ability. And so we were able to get so much done because of that. And then the environment, the city here, it wasn't a soccer city. It had no real deep history in it, but it's just so vibrant. The people are so great. It reminds me, one of the ways it reminds me of Liverpool is that the people are so proud of the city. Yeah. They're so kind of patriotic about their city. So people said to me early on, if you get this right, people will support you. But getting it right here means being a really good citizen. It doesn't mean being brash or being big and shiny and celebrity. That's not here. That might be LA or Miami. It's not here. It's about being part of the community, doing genuinely good work in the community. Like, all of our food in our stadium is Nashville or Tennessee food. It's a home stadium for Nashville people. And it was those things that I could see during that visit. I thought, this could be incredible as a kind of final, big thing for me.
Yeah.
I was 50 something.
So that was 2018, right?
Yeah.
You had the rights to the expansion team. You knew the owner, you knew the city, but there was probably no colors. There was no stadium.
No colors, no name.
No name even.
No name. No players, no coach.
Wow.
No stadium, no training ground.
So you've got
No staff.
2 years
I was
to do
one.
all of that.
Employee
Wow.
number one, like blank sheet of paper. There was a minor league USL team that John had some interest in, but he said to me, again, on day one, he said, you can either absorb some of that or ignore all of that.
Yeah.
That's totally up to you. So I was in an office at Ingram Group's headquarters, like 2 floors below John, in a little office, and that was Nashville Soccer Club. I was in that room. It was me and a piece of paper that said we were the,
I remember
28th
that
franchise
search.
in MLS.
Yeah, I remember that search like it was yesterday. It was interesting because John had said, like, hey, come spend a couple of days in Nashville with me. And Paul and I, a couple of days, like, we probably need a handful of hours max. And he's like, no, let's get to know one another really well. And just how helpful it was to have spent a whole day and then the next day just getting to know him as a human, the values of the organization, how people operated together. It was rare for them to hire leadership at that level because they had so much stay power within their senior executive teams across the other businesses. They just wanted to get the culture right, and they invested the time in a process to ensure that they minimize risk as much as possible. And it's worked. It's gone really well these past several years. And now you're moved into a vice chair role, and you're having to learn how to manage differently.
It's been an incredible journey. I think that the relationship I have with John, and I think he would say this, I can't speak for him, but I'd say we're friends first now, and he's my boss second. As much as we've achieved it because of all the things that he kind of puts on the table. And I think that I didn't come here to run the MLS team. I came to build it. And when it was built, I felt like that's not what I'm, right for now, is to run the day to day. And this year we've transitioned away from that into this more advisory type role and special projects role. And it's a perfect way, we describe it as keeping the band together, and it's perfect for both of us. We're both almost the same age. We're both at that time of life where we want to be doing this stuff, but we don't want to be doing it every minute of every day. But we both care passionately about what we've created, and we both care passionately about the city and the sport and where the sport goes in this country. Is the perfect storm for me to be able to make Nashville my long-term home. Met somebody here, getting married to somebody from here, and bought a new home here, and it couldn't have gone better. And I'm hugely grateful for it.
7 questions we ask everybody at the end of every interview, called the 7-question Blitz. I'm going to walk you through those. First question: what sports event have you never been to that you would love to attend?
This will sound crazy because we did a bunch of work for WWE, but I'd like to go to WrestleMania. One of my, and I can go, I just haven't ever had the time. One of my really good friends who lives here in Nashville is Sheamus, the WWE wrestler. It's going on right now, WrestleMania. And I keep telling him I'm going to come one. I still know some of the guys who wrestled previously, still know Sheamus because he lives here. He's a massive Liverpool fan. As crazy as it sounds for a 62-year-old, and I'm actually not a big WWE fan. I'd just like to go. I think it's amazing that thing is so successful.
Yeah.
And I used to go when we were doing the live events in Asia. It's just astounding. And I know that WrestleMania is the pinnacle of it. I just love to see it live.
No, I went my first time last year, and I was blown away. The fact that this many, we did it in St. Pete, Florida, where the Tampa Bay Rays play.
Yeah.
And it was we've been to the World Series, and they had more people for WrestleMania than it did for the World Series.
Yeah, it's great. And
it was unbelievable.
And, I've been to 2 World Cup finals. I've been to tennis finals. I've been to every Formula One race in the world except Austin.
Really? Seriously?
Yeah, every single one.
No way.
Numerous Champions League, FA Cup finals,
Yeah.
Euro finals. I've done all of those. So it doesn't seem like a very traditional sport.
WWE for sure.
Yeah.
And probably one of the last. No, it's a great sport. What 3 people, living or historical, would you want to play a round of golf with?
John Lennon.
Nice.
My absolute
Yeah, in your
idol.
backyard.
Yeah. I mean, just love to spend time. So I'm not sure he was much of a golfer, but neither am I.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried
That'll
to be.
make it fun.
Yeah. I think he'd be awesome. Bill Shankly, the former Liverpool manager.
Yeah.
He was the guy when I was sort of first started following Liverpool, and a bit like Jurgen. I mean, more so than Jurgen, but I think. But almost like a prophet to Liverpool fans. He just had these incredible sort of sayings. And then, this will seem like a strange one, but my best friend in life was my cousin. Sadly passed away 7 years ago. I'd actually like him to join because I never got to say goodbye to him. So he wasn't like sick, he just died.
Wow.
And so, I think just to spend time with somebody that you spend so much time with, but I always think when somebody is passing gradually, it's actually a blessing to some degree. Not that they're dying, but that you get to spend time and say what you have to say. And when somebody just goes, so it might not seem like the traditional choice, but it'd be a good one for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. You said you've been to countless sporting events. What sports memory holds the dearest place in your heart?
It has to be the 2005 Champions League final in Istanbul. So I didn't work for the club. I was just a fan. I flew from Malaysia. I went with a bunch of people who are friends of mine who were in the sport. People from different clubs, and Jeff Slack, who was at, I think, Inter Milan at the time, Andrew Croker, and a whole bunch of people. And Ahmet Umvar, who was on the board at Galatasaray, was like hosting us. And we go there, AC Milan, Liverpool, final, Istanbul. It was kind of corporate hospitality. It was pretty fancy. And I had my Liverpool shirt on under my suit.
Yeah.
We go and we're kind of having a bit of fun before the game, and we have like a wager, and there's a bunch of Italian guests as well. And we have a wager on, of course I bet on Liverpool to win, and we're 3-0 down at half time. And it's a disaster, and everybody's and then, you know the rest. It's get back to 3-3, it goes to penalties. And it was just like the greatest range of emotion I've ever experienced at a game. And I literally just ripped off my jacket. And I left it in the stadium because I had my Liverpool shirt on underneath. And then we went back into Istanbul, and we were staying in this very fancy hotel right on Taksim Square, which is where all the fans were. And we get in the hotel and somebody says, "Would you like a drink?" I was like, "I'd like a drink, but I'm not having it here. I'm going out there." And we went in this bar. I'm in this bar with like 3 or 4 people, not Liverpool fans, people who were with us, who'd never experienced anything like this. And I was literally on the bar starting these songs. And like 2 years later, I'm working for the club. But,
That's amazing.
But it was the greatest sporting moment of my life, without a doubt.
That's awesome.
Incredible. Yeah.
What's something about you that people may not know yet?
My real passion outside of sports is woodworking, carpentry.
What do you build?
Everything. Like right now, I'm in the middle of building what would effectively be like a pool house at my house. Like the whole structure. Like it's 27 by 16.
Wow.
It's made out of cedar. And I've made everything, the structure, the roof, the cabinets, the bar.
We gotta see photos after this.
Yeah.
We got to know how we can commission work from you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not cheap.
Now you're
I understand.
Despite the way I look, I am not cheap.
Understand. That's really
But yeah,
cool.
carpentry is my
What
jam.
a cool skill.
So when I moved to my new house in Nashville last year, the number one sort of priority with the realtor was it needs to have room for me to have a workshop.
so you can build.
I have a workshop almost as big as this room.
That's really cool.
We could talk a lot about that.
Oh, I know.
Awful lot.
What are your professional pet peeves?
I hate people who are late. I always tell this story when I go to a new place so they get the message early, is that when I took over as CEO at Liverpool, so I go on Friday, I'm like commercial director or something, and then going Monday morning, I'm the guy, right? And I have 9 o'clock management meeting, everyone in the boardroom. And at 9:01, there's 2 people missing. So I get up and I lock the door. It's my first meeting. And the 2 people come, and of course, they've been getting coffee and sandwiches or whatever they're doing. And I open and knock at the door. They're rattling the door, trying to get in. I go up, I open it, yep. And they say, "Oh, here for the meeting." So yeah, meeting started like 3 minutes ago. You're late. Closed it, locked it. Again, I look, "No, come on." I was like, "No, if you can't show up on time, you're not coming in my meeting."
Wow.
Closed the door, off they went.
They learned that.
Had the
lesson.
meeting, everyone's like this.
The new boss is here.
Yeah, and it was just a bit of effect.
That's
and then I went and spoke to both of them, and I'm like, "Look, it's good. It's all good. But if you can't show up," I have this belief that if you can't show up on time to meet with your boss, what happens when you go for a meeting with a client, and how does that reflect, going back to what I said about the way you conduct yourself as Liverpool Football Club or Nashville. So, like, I think it's important, and it's a real, so what's really funny is in Nashville, we have the same meeting at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. Everyone shows up about 8:40. The meeting's over before 9. That's the truth.
Yeah,
honestly,
that's funny.
the meeting is over like sometimes before it's supposed to start.
Well, I think it's probably a remnant of the military training as well, right?
Oh yeah,
That's cool.
If you're on time, you're late.
If you weren't in your current role and you could not work in sports, what would be the dream job? Is it a carpenter? Did you tell us already?
And you've already lived 2 dream jobs in your life, right?
No,
So-
you know what I'd like to be? I'd like to be the delivery guy for super yachts. I love boating as well. I've 2 boats actually. I have
That's a great job.
I have a fishing boat in Florida, and I have a little runabout boat here on the lake where I live. But I'd love to be delivering, like, you know, some gigantic yacht from Southampton to Cape Town or something.
I love that answer.
What a great job that would be, right? You know,
we
just on the ocean, in the sun.
Yeah.
we have the pleasure of going to many Super Bowls in our business, and inevitably the owners show up and there's a yacht competition.
For sure.
It's amazing. Like, who's the guy that just takes care of the yacht? That's his job, you know?
And, you know, live on the yacht.
Low
Yeah.
pressure.
Low pressure.
Probably paid well and love your life.
Just keep that thing clean and don't crash it, you know? All right, we're in Nashville. All kinds of great cuisines here, but what is your favorite place we should check out while we're here?
I have to be careful. I have a lot of friends who own a lot of restaurants.
And you probably have partners.
If I
and
get
stuff
this
too.
wrong, I'm like in real
exactly.
trouble, right?
You can give a few.
How many can you answer in 10 seconds? Just drop them.
No, I'm gonna go for something completely left field, because I definitely, like, if I go for one of the better restaurants, then like I could say, you know, hot chicken, because that's very Nashville. I'm not gonna. So where I live is out in the sort of countryside, a little out by the lake, and I've been there since last November. And every day when I drive in and drive home, there's this tiny little shack on the side of the road, little kind of almost looks like a trailer that is like a restaurant bar. It's called the Lucky Rooster, and it's been closed since I moved there. And everyone was like, it's not that great, and it had a fire, but it's going to reopen. And anyway, it reopened about 2 weeks ago. They have the greatest burger
Really?
ever.
Really?
And it's like such a dive.
Wow.
Like, but good beer. They sell Guinness, which I drink.
Oh, man.
And so I'm going to go there because
We're going to have to drive a while.
anything else I choose, there are millions of amazing, truly amazing restaurants. Locust is a great one in 12 South that a friend of mine owns, and Prince's Hot Chicken is one of our providers at the stadium.
All right, I'll change it up then. What about Liverpool? Favorite restaurant in Liverpool?
Ooh,
That's tough too, isn't it?
I would say the Quarter. I met Paul in there actually. The Quarter it's in the Georgian quarter of Liverpool. It's a very unassuming kind of breakfasty lunch place, but really cool. It's in that, there's a street there, I think it's Blackburn Terrace, that is one of the oldest Victorian streets in the UK. This little restaurant cafe is on the corner there. I love it. It's I like
order.
I don't like fancy. I'm not a fancy person. So
Well, Ian, so much fun spending time with you. Thanks for giving us your afternoon.
Likewise.
Loved this conversation. We could have gone a couple more hours, but
Seriously.
thank you.
thank you.
Congrats on
Thank you
everything.
both.
It's been
Enjoyed
fun.
it. Awesome.